For Eldritch Moon, I'm Gabby Sparts here with Ian Duke in the booth, and we are getting ready to watch round 6. And boy, we have some good feature matches for you this round. Our players are ready, so let's head down to the feature match. Hello everybody and welcome back to Pro Tour Eldritch Moon. This is Gabby Sparts joined by R&D member Ian Duke. And we are getting ready to watch our first feature match. And boy, this is a good one. We have Luis Scott-Vargas on the left sitting there. He's a Hall of Famer, Pro Tour champion, has brought Bant Company to the table today. The boogeyman of the format, if you may. And over on the right, we see Steve Rubin. Now, he's brought Black-Green Delirium to the table. He's the Pro Tour champion of Shadows over Innistrad, so he's a defending champion coming here. It's a Pro Tour that Luis top-8'd last round, and our players are underway here.
Yeah, interesting to note, Gabby, Steve Rubin coming off Pro Tour win in the last Shadows over Innistrad Pro Tour. He actually played green-white tokens there, which went on to be the most popular and the strongest deck of last Standard season. He's actually switched geared, and he's playing Black-Green Delirium here at this tournament. So in his estimation, green-white tokens is not the place to be for this tournament.
So it looks like Selfless Spirit is the play for Luis. Selfless Spirit is a new addition for the company decks. It's a real team player.
Yeah, Selfless Spirit likely to be really important here this weekend. We've seen lots and lots of players bringing Kozilek's return decks, and this is one of the most effective tools against it. So cool to see Luis main decking that card.
So Deadweight is going to take that Selfless Spirit down. And Luis, usually kidding around, he likes to kid around with a booth, was promptly told he cannot play his lands that way. Looks like a Yavimaya Coast for him and a pass back to Steve. So taking a look at Steve's hand, there's a Deadweight, a Tireless Tracker, Grasp of Darkness, Evolving Wilds, and a couple of lands. So not a lot of action. However, the Tireless Tracker is able to draw so many cards even when all you have in hand is lands. There's a Tireless Tracker for Steve. Luis is going to spell Queller that. Away goes the Tireless Tracker.
Spell Queller, of course, the big new addition to these Bant Company decks with Eldritch Moon.
Here we can see it on the right. 3-mana, 2/3 flash flying. And when it enters the battlefield, you can exile a spell with converted mana cost 4 or less. And when it leaves the battlefield, you can cast it again without paying its mana cost. So land for Luis and a Selfless Spirit coming down. And then pass back to Steve Rubin.
So one thing that's really interesting in this matchup is Selfless Spirit, while it's usually great at protecting your other creatures by making them indestructible, its one weakness is actually a lot of these black removal spells that give minus power and toughness. Cards like Grasp of Darkness, Languish, or Liliana the Last Hope.
Just exactly as you named it, there goes Grasp of Darkness. Gonna take care of that Spell Queller. That Selfless Spirit can't really do anything about it. Evolving Wilds for Steve Rubin and pass back.
So a really nice turn for Steve there. He gets the Tireless Tracker back, he takes out the Selfless Spirit, plays a land, gets a clue. The land he played happened to be Evolving Wild, so he can sacrifice that and get another clue. So things are looking, pretty good as we progress here into the mid-game for Steve Rubin.
What do you think either of these players are trying to do in the matchup?
So basically this is a Collected Company. The Collected Company deck is trying to flood the board with lots of creatures, lots of value creatures that are doing things to disrupt the opponent, like Reflector Mage and Spell Queller. The Black-Green Delirium deck, I think, is kind of more the control deck in this matchup. It's looking to take out enemy creatures with lots of removal spells, maybe to hope to stick Liliana the Last Hope, and then Languish is the other really big card that I want to highlight in this matchup. It's great for sweeping the board against all of the Bant Company deck's smaller creatures.
We're going to see a pass back to Luis, a draw step. Selfless Spirit getting in there for 2, dropping Steve down to 15. So Luis with a wealth of options here. He has a Duskwatch Recruiter, Reflector Mage, 2 of them actually, a Dromoka's Command, and a Fortified Village. Looks like he's opting for Duskwatch Recruiter, and there's going to be a fight here. Recruiter taking down that Sylvan Advocate, putting a counter and a pass back to Steve.
Yeah, Luis taking that window of opportunity to take out Sylvan Advocate before Steve Rubin's 6th land enters the battlefield, causing Sylvan Advocate to grow to a 4/5.
So land for Steve, getting another clue. And important to note, he's got 3 clues in play. So if they're planning on playing a long game, those clues are going to be meaningful.
Definitely true. So far in Steve's hand, we see a 2nd copy of Sylvan Advocate, which can come down right now as a 4/5, and also a Ruinous Path there, ready to take out a problematic creature. I think it's worth firing off the Ruinous Path on the Duskwatch Recruiter just to prevent Luis from having a long-term source of card advantage. You know, with both players relatively low on cards in hand, but Steve Rubin having those clues on the battlefield, I think he wants to just kind of trade 1 for 1, ensure that Luis is deprived of his tools that would let him hang in there in a long game.
So he went ahead and followed your exact line, Ian. The Ruinous Path, attempting to kill Duskwatch Recruiter, only gets the Selfless Spirit out of the way.
Right. But that is step 1 toward eventually getting rid of that Duskwatch Recruiter.
Mm-hmm. So it looks like 3 mana Reflector Mage. And suddenly Steve Rubin's board is looking pretty lonely. There's nothing there, actually.
Yeah, what Steve would really love to find here is a Languish, just to take out everything that Luis has on the board here. Goes ahead and cracks a clue.
And it looks like that is what he's digging for. He's opting for 3. This is presumably a Nissa. Getting him another land as well. Getting him a little bit closer to flipping this Nissa. Here you see Nissa Vastwood Seer over on the right.
And this has been a nice turn for Steve here in that he's been able to successfully spend his mana on other things despite getting Reflector Mage on the previous turn. And that's one of the things you always want to keep in mind when playing against a Reflector Mage deck is leaving yourself options and other ways to spend your mana so you don't get stuck in a spot where your only non-land cards have just been returned to your hand and you're locked out from casting them.
Steve Rubin does play that land and is able to flip Nissa into Nissa Sage Animist. A tick down is going to create an Ashaya in play. A 4/4 is pretty good on this board.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things about the Bant Company deck is, well, it's great about getting, you know, lots of card advantage by getting multiple creatures into play with Collected Company and getting value out of each of their triggers. Ultimately, it does just have a lot of like 2-power creatures sitting around. So having big blockers can be great as long as they don't get Reflector Maged.
So Luis looking here to push damage and make sure that the Nissa is dead this turn. Attacks with the whole team. Ashaya can get in front of the Duskwatch Recruiter, but the Selfless Spirit is going to protect all of Luis's creatures. So Nissa goes down. Duskwatch Recruiter still around. Hopefully we'll be able to draw him into more because he's out of cards here.
Yeah, I think I saw Grasp of Darkness perhaps picked up there. We'll see how this turn plays out here.
So a tracker and another clue. Man, this tracker never gets tired. It's always hard at work. Yeah, you saw that correctly indeed. Grasp of Darkness taking down the Duskwatch Recruiter, and now Luis's board has been reduced to just 2 Reflector Mages. They can't really attack well into this big Sylvan Advocate. It's gonna be an uphill battle from here.
So Luis with no cards in hand, likely looking for Collected Company, I think is his best draw here at this point into some gas, something excellent here, like another Reflector Mage perhaps. But a lot of threats to deal with, and yeah, Luis doesn't find what he needs, goes ahead and packs it up.
Yeah, and packs it up. Steve Rubin up a game here on our main match. We're going to take a look at one of our back matches now. It's going to be, oh, this is a good one. Yeah. Before we take a look at one of our back matches, we will send you some messages, and then we're back with some great, great feature matches.
Put your game to the test at a Grand Prix. These Magic celebrations are headlined by 2-day open tournaments with the best players in your region, as well as top Magic pros from around the world. Upcoming Grand Prix include Lille, Indianapolis, Guangzhou, Louisville, and Kyoto. Visit magic.wizards.com/Grand Prix for more information.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back. This is round 6 here at Pro Tour Eldritch Moon. We're taking a look at Patrick Dickman, who's playing Bant Eldrazi rights, versus Yuya Watanabe, who's playing Red-Green Ramp. Now, Ian, is this similar to the deck that Reed is playing, the Red-Green Ramp?
It looks like it actually has quite a few differences. There are some similarities in that both decks are trying to go all the way up to Emrakul, and that they do take advantage of Delirium. But yeah, Yuya has a couple different twists here. I won't necessarily spoil them right now. I think we're better served by actually taking a look in at the match and seeing what those differences are for ourselves on the battlefield.
So taking a look at Dickman's side of the battlefield, looks like, well, there's a lot going on. So a Tormenting Voice has been tucked away by a Spell Queller. An Eldrazi Displacer. There's so much going on this battlefield, but it looks like on Yuya's side, only an Ishkan and baby spiders. Fiery Impulse taking down that Spell Queller. Spell Mastery is online.
Yeah, I believe that is that a Tormenting Voice underneath the Spell
Yeah,
Queller,
that's what it looks like to me. And so Tormenting Voice can be recast here, discarding this mountain.
Wait. I don't think that you need to discard for this, or is it additional cost? I'm not sure.
So the players are currently discussing what happens when Tormenting Voice comes back from underneath a Spell Queller, if Yuya has to discard a land or not once it's being recast.
Yeah, and I believe the answer is that he does. You're allowed to play the spell without paying its mana cost, but there's an additional non-mana cost of discarding a card. So analyzing this board state a little bit, it looks like Dickman, things going according to plan for him here, and that he has lots of creatures on the battlefield. His deck is a little bit different from the traditional Bant Company decks. We saw it a couple rounds ago, and I can tell you some of the major differences here is that he's playing Cryptolith Rights, and he also has colorless mana for some Eldrazi like Reality Smasher and Eldrazi Displacer. So he's a little bit more of a combo-ish Bant Company deck.
We'll take a look at what's going on with this match in a little bit, but we're heading back to our main match for now. Let's see what happens between the match of Luis Scott-Vargas and Steve Rubin. Our players are underway here. Lumbering Falls and Hissing Quagmire are the lands. So Ian, moving post-board, do you think either of these decks are particularly favored? What are they trying to do post-board?
In general, I would say post-sideboard will favor the Black-Green Delirium deck just because it's a deck that benefits so much from having additional options. Without getting too much into the exact sideboards of these decks, in general, the Black-Green Delirium decks tend to play a lot of one-offs, things that they can search up with Traverse the Ulvenwald or mill themselves into, with cards like Vessel of Nascency or Grapple with the Past. Steve's deck in particular, I'm sure he's bringing extra copies of Languish, that being one of the key cards here. We may see Kalitas, Trader of Get, as well, as always a card that's been great against these green-white decks that have difficulty removing it.
So Luis getting on the board early with that Reflector Mage. Unfortunately, couldn't bounce anything. Tireless Tracker coming down for Steve Rubin, getting ready to draw some cards here. So second Reflector Mage, away goes the Tireless Tracker. Getting in for 2, dropping Steve Rubin down to 18. This is interesting. This is one of those games where it seems like the pace of it is just going very quickly. So you kind of expect these very long, drawn-out games when you're playing, something like Bant Company versus Black-Green Delirium. But this could be over pretty quickly, except for that now. Looks like that Languish is going to take care of both Reflector Mages, and we're back down to 0.
Yeah, it looked like Luis was off to a great start there with a couple of Reflector Mages, just buying him some early tempo, getting some early beatdown. But again, Gabby, the importance of Languish in this matchup, being able to take out almost all of Bant Company's creatures at a moment's notice, gets Steve Rubin right back into this game. And I actually think I saw even an additional copy of Languish in his hand, so he'll be able to get one more board sweep if he needs to.
So it looks like Luis is responding to the Tireless Tracker and seeing if maybe he finds a Spell Queller, which he does. It is going to exile the Tireless Tracker, and Reflector Mage would have bounced it, but there's nothing there
Yeah,
now.
I was actually going to point out there's the really interesting decision with Collected Company whether you cast it in response to a creature or after the creature has entered the battlefield, because depending on whether you get Spell Queller or Reflector Mage, one or the other would be better. Luis did it in response there because he'd already seen 2 Reflector Mages, but in the end he just hit both anyway, so he had his bases covered.
Always lucky.
But yeah, it's something to be looking out for in the future anyway.
That's the cool new addition coming in for the Bant deck. Tamiyo Field Researcher, perfect colors / an awesome draw engine. The uptick ability in particular, you choose up to 2 target creatures, and until end of turn, whenever either of those creatures deals damage, you get to draw a card. So, you know, this deck also has nice evasive flyers, Selfless Spirit, Spell Queller, both manage to go over the top of some decks. So, awesome draw engine.
Yeah, and this puts Steve Rubin in a really tight spot because now Luis has both creature threats and a non-creature threat in the form of Tamiyo, as well as Sylvan Advocate with 6 lands, which can survive through Languish. So Steve Rubin's going to need a combination of cards to really deal with this board.
Good.
Looks like he fires off the second Languish, which sweeps away 2 of the other creatures, gets his Tireless Tracker back from out underneath the Spell Queller, but still Luis in a commanding position here with both Tamiyo and Sylvan Advocate.
Taking a look at Rubin's hand, there's a Sylvan Advocate, a Transgress the Mind, Murder, Ruinous Path, and Llanowar Way. So still a lot of cards / that Tireless Tracker threatens to draw more cards. Over on Luis's side, we have a Forest, a Duskwatch Recruiter, a Fortified Village, and a Yavimaya Co. So not working with a lot here, though. Duskwatch Recruiter is good at finding more of your team. There he is, Duskwatch Recruiter, and a pass back to Steve.
Steve all the way down to 5 life here. Took a huge attack there from Sylvan Advocate plus Lumbering Falls. And now he's in a really tight position here. I mean, he can use a single target removal spell to take out the Sylvan Advocate, but he's still facing down that Lumbering Falls. And the Tamiyo also, which just keeps ticking up and up toward that ultimate. So time is of the essence here for Steve Rubin.
Getting an update from one of our back tables, Brian Braun-Duin currently leads 1-0 versus Paul Cheon.
So Murder taking out Sylvan Advocate. Tireless Tracker hanging back to block. Could, threaten to block either the Lumbering Falls or the Duskwatch Recruiter.
And there we get to see a look at Murder. 3 mana, instant speed, destroy target creature. Not a card we've seen a lot of this weekend, but it's definitely very good in black-based control decks. Dead Wake taking down that Duskwatch Recruiter, and in comes Tireless Tracker for 3, dropping Luis down to 17.
So Steve there opting to chip away at Tamiyo rather than represent a blocker on the Lumbering Falls. I like that play. I mean, leaving up the Tireless Tracker leaves Tamiyo still ticking up toward the ultimate. Luis can still activate the Lumbering Falls, and plus Tamiyo on the Lumbering Falls would allow him to trade as well as draw a card. Just doesn't seem like a winning line of play for Steve Rubin, so I like the attack there a lot.
So in comes the Slumbering Falls. Because of the Tamiyo uptick, Luis gets to draw a card. Looks like Rubin has picked up a copy of Ishkana, Graph Widow.
That would certainly be great to get online. I think Steve's problem so far this game is he's just been stuck on 4 lands. I mean, he's got plenty of powerful cards to cast in his hand. He just can't cast more than 1 per turn, really.
Well, he definitely needs some blockers at this point. Steve considering some of his options. Transgress the Mind could take a peek at Luis's hand, but he needs a way to deal with some of those attackers that are coming in. Ishkana and Graph Widow. So he is going to lead with Transgress. He sees that he cannot do anything about this. He's going to pick up his cards. The players are even now. They're going to push it on to a game 3.
So if you're wondering what happened there, I think Steve knew he was dead no matter what. So he just wanted to cast a Transgress the Mind, take a peek at Luis's hand, maybe see how Luis sideboarded, or see if there were any surprising cards he didn't know about before conceding the game. And sure enough, he did see a negate in Luis's hand, which could be very valuable information for the next game. Not playing your Languish into a negate could be the difference between winning and losing. So
yeah. Moving back to one of our back tables, taking a look at Patrick Dickman versus Yuya Watanabe. Dickman's playing Bant Eldrazi Rides, and Yuya Watanabe is on red-green ramp. Taking a look at this board now. Eldrazi Displacer and Reflector Mage. That's a nice combo.
Yep.
Over on Yuya's side, we have a Hangerback Walker and an Ishkan, I believe. So getting an update from what's happened in this game. We missed this because we weren't here yet, but we've already, Yuya has already forced Dickman to play a Reflector Mage bouncing Umracool in order to not die.
Oh, interesting.
Oh,
Oh,
and this
so-
is Yuya playing Dickman's turn.
Okay. I was wondering why the things are a little confusing and Yuya's leaning over the table there. This is actually Patrick Dickman's turn. Yuya is in control of Patrick's turn.
Okay.
All right, so this is now Dickman's additional turn. Yeah, and so Patrick Dickman used the Displacer to displace his own Ishkana and making three new spiders. It sounds like this was a hell of a game.
Yeah, this is an interesting board state to jump into.
Table A is ready. Let me know when it start.
We're gonna head back to one of our to our main match, Scott-Vargas versus Steve Rubin. We'll see what happens. I will give you updates on what's going on in that match in a little bit. Hissing Quagmires to start for Steve, and just a land for Luis and pass. Sylvan Advocate, so that's a pretty good start, except it's immediately dead. Down goes the Advocate because of that ultimate price, and we're going to see an untap from Steve. Here you can see ultimate price. 2 mana, destroy target monocolor creature. Ultimate price was made for killing Sylvan Advocate. Liliana. The last hope. Let's see how much hope it brings for Steve in this game. Looking pretty good on this empty board right now.
Yeah, anytime you can stick a Planeswalker onto an empty board, you're in great shape. Liliana, a really big enabler of these black-green Delirium decks. Steve using her -2 ability to mill the top 2 cards of his library, look for a creature, doesn't find one, but still gets a couple new card types into the graveyard, which will be really important for Delirium.
Sure.
So 3 mana for Luis. Gonna play a Nissa Vastwood Seer, get a land. Has to take a little bit of pain though. Thankfully this forest will mean that he doesn't have to take any more damage from blue lands. Nissa thankfully can survive through the Liliana, though Liliana's pretty good against Selfless Spirit.
Yes, that is. That's a very, very important interaction here for sure.
Taking a look at our players' hands. Luis has a lot of stuff. Reflector Mage, Spell Queller, Negate, something that you mentioned earlier, could really come up against Languish. 2 Collected Companies, and he's about to have a 4th land in just 1 turn. Over on the other hand, Steve has a Forest, a Traverse the Ulvenwald, and an Evolving Wilds. That's not going to do it. He's going to have to find something more meaningful here.
Looks like Steve in the process of resolving a Traverse. We will see in just a moment what he got there. Looks like Ishkana. Yeah.
Liliana ticks up, targeting the Nissa, and Ishkana is going to get this board under control. That was a fantastic sequence for him. Fortified Village. Revealing Forest. Just a quick update from one of our back tables. In the game in which Emrakul had been resolved and eventually bounced with a Reflector Mage, it has been recast.
So down comes Ishkana for Steve Rubin here. Liliana ticks up again, minusing Nissa. And Luis, of course, casting Collected Company after passing the turn with 4 lands untapped. I think both players knew what was coming there.
So unlucky players at 4 lands and has nothing to do.
Right.
Looks like he finds a Duskwatch Recruiter and a Sylvan Advocate off the top. And untap and a draw. Forest is a draw for Luis Scott-Vargas this turn.
So we're really progressing into the mid-game here. Both players' decks doing what they do. Luis just pouring plenty of creatures onto the battlefield, looking to get some value out of Duskwatch Recruiter, as well as a second copy of Collected Company in Luis's hand. So plenty more gas coming out of the Bant Company side of this matchup. Steve Rubin, on the other hand, with Liliana and Ishkanah going, is doing his graveyard thing, getting plenty of spiders onto the battlefield.
Quick update from one of our back tables. Owen Turttonwald versus Reed Duke, who are playing back there, are currently tied at 1-1. Here we see the flip side of a Duskwatch Recruiter. Crownhorde Howler is a card that's really important in just generally in the deck. It's great at allowing the players to just kind of like dump out all your creatures at once. And if it manages to flip back and forth, you can just continue to draw even more cards.
So interesting little sequence there. Steve Rubin went for a second Traverse the Elvenwald. Luis thought and then decided to negate it, which means that Luis won't be able to cast his second Collected Company this turn, so very relevant there. I think Luis just correctly realizing that he doesn't want Steve to have access to something really powerful like an Emrakul, especially with that Liliana, the Last Hope on the battlefield. You know, Steve has just so many options there with what he can get and then what he can bring back from the graveyard.
Unfortunately for Luis, Steve had a second Traverse Ulvenwald there. Does find that Emrakul and now currently sitting in his hand. So, Ian, are we supposed to call a flavor judge of Liliana and Emrakul out at the same time? I don't know how I feel about that.
Yeah, that may be the case, actually. I don't know how I feel about that either. Zombies, spiders, and Eldrazi all playing together. Seems unfair.
The Duskwatch Recruiter flipping back. And a pass back to Luis. Looks like he found an Ojutai's Commando. That's a way to take care of Emrakul. Taking a look at Luis's hand. Considering his options, he's got a wealth of options, truly. Collected Company, Spellqueller, Reflector Mage, Ojutai's Command. A lot of reactive things, and he does know that Emrakul isn't sitting in Steve's hand. Seems like he's just going to ship it back to him. Steve cracking that Evolving Wilds to find a swamp.
So Steve's still, I think, a little ways away from playing Emrakul here. I believe he has 4 or 5 different types in his graveyard, which would mean he needs about 8 mana. We can get the exact for you in just a moment here, but working his way up to Emrakul. Of course, Emrakul costing 13 mana, reduced by each card type in your graveyard.
There we see Emrakul, a Promise Stund over on the right. 13 mana, 13/13. Flying Trample, protection from instants. That's an interesting clause, actually. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I definitely can, actually. So the original version, or one of the earlier versions of Emrakul, I should say, actually gained control of your opponent until the end of their next turn.
Okay.
So you actually controlled both yourself and your opponent for the remainder of your turn when you cast Emrakul. Now, it turned out that was pretty problematic from a rules perspective, and also for digital implementations of Magic, like Duels and Magic Online. So we kind of rethought a little bit how to get that similar effect, and that's why we gave her protection from instants to achieve that effect of you can't just kill the Emrakul immediately when I cast it.
That's a very nice workaround.
Yeah, it ended up working out pretty well, and yeah, we're very happy with where she ended up.
So Collected Company is able to, the Reflector Mage is going to bounce one of the Ishkanah tokens. And a Reflector Mage, or sorry, a Tireless Tracker for Luis. The Grasp of Darkness down. it goes. Steve here considering some of his options as well. The only card in hand is currently Emrakul, the Promised End. On the other hand, Luis with Reflector, Mage, Spellqueller, and Ojutai's Command.
So I think what Steve is trying to do here is just kind of hold out a little bit until he can get enough mana or cards in graveyard to cast Emrakul, at which point, Luis may have the option to Ojutai's Command it, but Steve could just bring it right back to his hand with Liliana.
How much of a priority do you think Luis has to make of killing this Liliana in light of that?
I think it's a pretty high priority if he's able to do it, although the board is pretty stalled up with the Ishkana and the Spider tokens right now. So, but definitely Luis with the options here and Steve with the sort of late game plan that he's hoping to hold out to hit. So it's kind of on Luis to try to figure out how to piece apart the board state right now and start cracking through and maybe get rid of that Liliana, or just start pressuring Steve in such a way that he can't simply survive until he casts Emrakul and win the game.
So getting a clue by playing a land. Still with a wealth of options here. Over on the right, we can see Tireless Tracker. 3 mana, 3/2. And it seems like when people play Tireless Tracker, they always have the land for the clue. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, you investigate. And when you sack a clue, it grows by +1/+1.
So the way this game is shaping up, it definitely looks like Luis will win the late game as long as he doesn't lose to Emrakul. So he just wants to be super careful. He, of course, knows the Emrakul is in Steve's hand. It was revealed to traverse the Ulvenwald earlier on in the game. So Luis basically has full information about what's going on both sides of the table here.
How do you feel like knowing that Emrakul's on the other side? How is that going to affect the board state that he currently has right now?
So he's definitely going to be thinking about leaving Ojutai's Command up is one thing, as well as holding on to that Reflector Mage to buy a little bit more time with Emrakul. Although it's worth pointing out there is an interesting interaction between Reflector Mage and Emrakul. Because Emrakul ends up granting your opponent an additional turn, and Reflector Mage locks out the card from being cast until your opponent's next turn, what would happen is... sometimes what happens is that extra turn actually makes the difference and lets you just untap and play Emrakul again.
Oh, that's really neat.
Yeah, well, I guess we'll cover that interaction a little bit more if it does
comes
come
up.
Yeah, if it does come up later on. So.
Getting an update from one of our back tables. That interaction actually did come up in one of the back tables in the match with Yuya.
Cards in hand? 3.
Players still considering their options here. Steve Rubin looks like he wants to put that Ishkana in front of Tireless Tracker. We're not sure who these creatures are attacking, but presumably some of them at Liliana. Actually, Luis is considering what happens if Liliana sticks around. Yeah, getting an update. It's all the creatures are currently attacking Liliana, so Luis keenly aware of what could happen if he is able to counter that Emrakul, but Liliana is able to buy it back in some way. This will drop Liliana down to 1 loyalty. Steve Rubin's going to crack the Evolving Wilds, getting a swamp.
Here it's Seth.
So interesting there that, Luis valued taking loyalty away from the Liliana so much that he was actually he's actually willing to send in the Tireless Tracker and actually lose that creature in exchange for getting in some damage on the Liliana. But yeah, the play definitely makes sense. I think Luis wants to avoid that turn where Steve goes Emrakul, Luis counters it with Ojutai's command, and then Steve can just bring it back again with Liliana. So really good thinking ahead to prevent that situation from happening.
Great draw here for Steve Rubin. And Nissa Vastwood Seer that can transform this turn.
Yeah, we may see that 4/4 Ashaya showing up here just to provide an extra blocker, make it that much more penalizing for Luis if he does want to attack into Liliana again.
Update from one of our back tables. Patrick Dickman versus Yuya Watanabe. They are currently 1-1. All right, so Nissa has transformed. Steve has a choice here. Does he want to draw cards? Does he want to have a 4/4 in play? 4/4 is a pretty good blocker against most of the things, except the Sylvan Advocate.
Yeah, although even then, the combination of Ashaya, the 4/4 elemental, and Ishkana could block and take out that Sylvan Advocate. So that's one route Steve can take. The major punish to that would be a Reflector Mage from Luis, which we do know Luis has. But yeah, it looks like instead Steve has opted to tick up on Nissa.
Guildleaf Winnower. That's a neat inclusion.
Yeah, this is another card that's kind of slept under the radar since it came out in Magic Origins. But it's a great card to have access to in these Delirium decks, something you can tutor up with Traverse.
Yeah, this is a sideboard card actually, and it's, you know what it's very good against? Spell Queller.
Yeah, 2 3s.
There we see Guildleaf Winnower over on the right. It has Menace, but when it enters the battlefield, it destroys target non-elf, so it cannot kill Sylvan Advocate, as long as the power and toughness aren't equal. Tamio Field Researcher coming down for Luis. In come all the creatures.
Wow, and that -2 from Tamio, just devastating there, tapping down those 2 big blockers on Steve Rubin's side of the battlefield and taking out 2 Planeswalkers.
Update from one of our back tables. Brian Bonduin takes the match between him and Paul Cheon. So this was a devastating turn for Steve. He lost both his Planeswalkers. His whole team is tapped. And currently he only has an Emrakul, the Promised End in hand. So what do you do here if you're Steve?
Yeah, this is a really tough situation. I mean, things were looking okay until that Tamio came down. And you know, Gabby, we saw Steve Rubin win the first game in this matchup, and it may come down to both the second and third games where Tamio is the star of the show. So really, really impressive from Luis's side there.
Here we go.
Okay, Emrakul comes out.
Emrakul, the Promised End. Luis, unfortunately, has 4 lands, but one of them is an Evolving Wilds. No counter here. He allows it to resolve. Deadweight takes down the Duskwatch Recruiter. Oh, Spellqueller comes in to save the day. Deadweight currently underneath that Spellqueller, though we don't know how long that'll be, considering that Steve has access to Luis's turn this time.
Yeah, one option, I mean, one simple option here among the other things is just to attack that Spellqueller into the Emrakul. Emrakul blocks, Deadweight comes back out and takes out the Duskwatch Recruiter.
So now Steve has to take a look at this and say, how much damage can I do? So the draw for Steve/Luis's turn is a Tireless Tracker. And so Steve's looking at the graveyard and saying, all right, how do let's wreck this.
So yeah, things that I'm seeing that would be good here are casting Tireless Tracker and countering it with Ojutai's command, attacking Spellqueller into Emrakul. Emrakul blocks, Deadweight comes out, goes on the Duskwatch Recruiter and kills that, and then Tamio can -2 and tap Steve's 2 remaining creatures.
That sounds awful.
I don't know if that's the perfect way to mess up your opponent's turn, but it sounds like a pretty good start.
It sounds pretty good. Yeah, so here we go. Spellqueller attacking into Emrakul. In comes Deadweight, down goes Duskwatch Recruiter. 3 mana, making sure he pays life for it. Tireless Tracker, counter from Ojutai's command. Man, you called it. Yeah, minus Tamio, tap down 2 creatures.
Okay, that is the power of Emrakul, boys and girls.
Is this the best Emrakul turn we've seen so
That's
far in the
what-
feature
I
match?
think
Because that
so.
was devastating.
That was pretty good.
Dear God. All right, so we are back again on Luis's turn. This is the following turn after Emrakul. And moving back to Steve Rubin.
So I believe Luis has a Lumbering Falls there, which can be a blocker. Guiltleaf Winnower, relevantly, having Menace here. That's 17 points, so not enough to beat Luis by themselves. Steve has to be thinking about what if Luis top decked a Flash Creature or something along those lines, but nope.
Yeah, and that'll do it. We see the hand extension there. Steve Rubin is going to take this match 2-1 versus Luis Scott-Vargas. Man, that Emrakul was insane.
Yeah, that was amazing.
We still got some sweet magic for all of you. We're moving back to one of our back matches. It is Owen Turttonwald playing the Duke himself.
Well, not the Duke.
That's true.
A Duke.
So Owen playing Teamer Emerge. Some people lovingly nicknamed it Teamerge. And Reed, we saw him in the feature match last round. He's playing the Red-Green Delirium ramp deck. So these two are amazing friends, teammates, have played infinite Magic against each other. You probably are keenly familiar with how both of their decks work.
Yeah, I mean, they tested together for this event. I think they each know how each other's decks work and what went into them and probably how the matchup plays out. I personally don't know which of these two is favored here. My guess would be probably Owen's deck with the inclusion of Elder Deep Fiend, just giving him a little bit more tempo advantage. But I could easily be wrong there.
Oh my goodness, dude, this is left and right.
We came at the right time.
We came at the right time. So Emrakul, the Promised End, coming down for Owen Turttonwald. There she is again, and once again, I'm putting Thinking Cap on. Let's see how much damage we can do. Otherwise, pretty simple board state here. Just two Shaman of the Forgotten Ways and an Elder Deep Fiend for Owen. All right, so Owen considering his options. His hand is currently a Shaman of the Forgotten Ways, and this is Pilgrimage and a Shivan Reef. There's his hand. Over on the other side, we have Reed with also an Emrakul, the Promised End, Traverse the Ulvenwald, Vessel of Nascency, and a Hedron Archive.
Draw.
All right, so this is the draw step. It's a forest, and now this is Owen controlling Reed's turn. There have been so many times that people have controlled other people's turns, Ian. We actually need a little, like a die or something to represent when people are being controlled. So he's counting up Reed's mana. And doing a little bit of math to see how far away Reed is from casting his own Emrakul.
Traverse.
All right, so Owen's going to start out by traversing. nice bonus. He gets to look at all of his deck. Although, in all fairness, he probably already knows the content of the deck.
So this is interesting. Owen actually counting his own library while resolving the traverse. Reads, I wonder what he's thinking about here.
Well, I see Ulamog at the bottom of his deck, so I wonder if he's considering what to, like, what happens if he's counting libraries. And the count is 28. So if you are Owen here and you're trying to train wreck Reed's turn, what are you thinking about here?
Well, step one is to see if there's anything you can traverse for and actually get that is useful. I mean, you can of course traverse and fail to find and get nothing, but you may actually be able to find something that you can use to wreck Reed even harder than just finding nothing.
And I think that's what he's opting for here. A World Breaker, and he's targeting his Reed's own Shrine of the Forsaken Gods, exiling it.
And that is certainly an effort to keep Reed from casting Reed's own Emrakul on Reed's next extra turn, which is coming right up. So, yeah, it's a little unusual to, when you have the option of just doing nothing for your opponent, to give them a 5/7 reach creature, but Owen values destroying that land much more than giving Reed this 5/7 creature, given the context of the match right now.
The other thing, too, is that Owen does have things like Elder Deep Fiend in his deck. Eventually, he can tap it, so it doesn't matter. Emrakul can attack easily through a World Breaker. So, you know, a 5/7, even though it's usually a very large body, in this board, it's not really doing that much.
Mm-hmm. So now we're on to Reed's extra turn here.
Taking a look at Reed's hand, we have an Emrakul the Promised End, a Vessel of Nascency, and a Hedron Archive. So looks like the players are doing a little bit of math here, seeing how far away we are from this Emrakul. So, I mean, one sort of easy play for Reed here is just to play the Vessel, crack it, and then just cast Hedron Archive and pass the turn. I mean, that's sort of like saying, hey, Owen, I hope you have nothing and that I can cast Emrakul next turn. But that may be the best that Reed can do with what he has right now. He revealed a couple good things here. Ulamog, the Ceaseless Hunger, Ulvenwald Hydra, and Anissa Vastwood Seer.
I feel like I'm going to throw up.
Yeah, I mean, Ulamog is certainly an awesome thing to have access to. Actually, I think I just heard Owen saying to Reed, I think I might have just thrown it away.
Really?
Yeah, I think I heard them saying that, so.
Well, Owen was keenly aware of that Ulamog, so he was definitely taking all of that into consideration. I wonder what line he's thinking of. There you see Ulamog, the Ceaseless Hunger. When you awesome cast trigger, you exile 2 permanents. But most importantly, and what Owen was taking a look at is when Ulamog attacks, you exile the top 20 cards of a library. So that ends the game pretty quickly. There's only 3 minutes left in this match as well, so this game is ending soon one way or another.
I wonder if what Owen was thinking about was actually playing Reed's Hedron Archive and sacrificing it to deny Reed the opportunity to cast it this turn. So
yeah, that's entirely possible, and it'll be interesting. It's possible that we might be able to get a chat with him and bring back some news about what that was.
Yeah,
but
I'd love to hear. I mean, that was just an amazingly intricate sequence to come in on, and really curious, you know, what both players were thinking about there. But yeah, I think what Owen was trying to do was just deny Reed as much mana as possible, and he probably thought hard about playing the Hedron Archive and sacrificing it right away to deny Reed the opportunity to just cast it here and then potentially untap with it.
It does feel a little bad that he does draw him 2 cards when he does that.
Right, which I assume is the reason why he didn't do that, but, you know, it's a risk either way for sure. So now we're back onto Owen's turn here. He certainly has a powerful board, but I don't think he has enough to end the game right here. You know, he can certainly make a big attack with Emrakul. Reed is able to block and absorb 7 of the damage with his World Breaker, but then Reed will simply be able to untap and play Emrakul and then potentially even survive to cast his Ulamog afterwards. Wow. Has Owen drawn a second copy of Emrakul?
Wow. All right, this is a big game.
Yeah, if that is the case, that is an amazing draw for Owen here. And it might be enough to flip things around and put him back in the driver's seat.
6.
So Owen getting in there with everybody.
2.
Yeah, the World Breaker had to get in front of Emrakul there. 5 mana. 6, 7. And if you're Reed at this point, You can start sweating it because you know what's coming. Here it is. She is. Emrakul, the Promised End. What an amazing draw for Owen.
And I believe Reed has 10 mana exactly, which means Owen can now control Reed's turn and cast Reed's... I mean, he could cast Reed's own Ulamog and exile some of Reed's permanents. I guess it's probably better just... Yeah, I think that would be the play there, right? So Reed can play the Ulamog and ensure that... Or sorry, Owen can play Reed's Ulamog for him and ensure he has the choice over which permanents are being exiled by Ulamog's ability, thereby leaving Owen's Emrakul on the battlefield and allowing Owen to attack on his next turn.
Yeah, and that's part of the reason why Owen was also counting his own library. He wants to make sure that if Ulamog does attack, he doesn't just die to it.
Right. So I believe the play here is, yeah, Owen has Reed cast Emrakul, exiles 2 non-essential permanents, perhaps, lands or something like that. Then Reed gets an extra turn. He gets to theoretically attack once with the Ulamog and exile 20 cards from Owen's library, but that's not enough for Owen to lose the game. And then on Owen's following turn, he can attack with Emrakul and win.
And time has been called on this round, so we're moving on to extra turns. Now, I want to pull up Emrakul, Ulamog, but when Ulamog enters the battlefield and the trigger goes on the stack, it's already on the battlefield, so it should be able to exile itself?
No, it's actually a caster.
It's a caster. All right, there you go. So,
yeah,
but he could get rid of the archive and another land.
Yep.
Yeah.
Float 2 mana. Activate World Breaker.
Oh, it looks like Owen has found maybe even a safer play here, which is simply activating World Breaker's ability to return it to Reed's hand and then cast the World Breaker and use the World Breaker's ability to exile the Hedron Archive. So this is even safer.
Yeah,
than
that was
allowing
a
Reed to
very
enter
nice
Ulamog.
line from Owen. It's very safe, right? It doesn't... You don't care, like we mentioned earlier. He doesn't care about the 5/7.
Right.
But denying Reed from 2 lands there?
Yep, it puts Reed low enough on lands that he's not going to be able to cast Ulamog before the game is over.
Got a final result from one of our other tables. Patrick Digman wins 2 over Yuya Watanabe. And we are in additional turns here. This is additional turn 1 of 5.
It's also worth noting the extra turn created by Emrakul counts as an additional turn. Additional turns just means there are 5 additional turns, right? Normally that's players alternating back and forth, but in this particular case, there's an additional, there's an extra turn there.
Okay, you got me. Good games.
There
Wow.
you go. And it was a very good draw. The player
Yeah,
acknowledging
that was an
down there.
intense game. I mean, Magic is hard enough when you're only playing with your own cards, but when you also have to figure out the optimal or most suboptimal play for your opponent, things get really tricky there. So pretty cool to watch that match unfold.
Yeah, and we see some nice banter between the players. Like I said, they're very good friends, and they know their decks and they know what they can do. So they can see how good of a draw that was. That was a fantastic draw for Owen. And currently undefeated, correct?
Yes, that puts Owen to 6-0 and Reed to 5-1.
And 1. And they're both doing fantastic in this tournament still. So there will be a lot more Magic coming in the next couple of rounds. And hopefully we get to see more sweet decks like this. The Delirium decks have been awesome.
Yeah.
Extra turns have been pretty cool to watch.
I'd love to see more of those blue-black decks with Voldar and Pariah. Those were really cool
Yeah,
and
those are
unexpected
sweet.
for me.
Absolutely. Rich, what do you have for us over in the news desk?
Gabby, what we have for you is just an astonishing array of talent at the top tables. Patrick Dickman, modern master most notably, but currently leading the World Magic Cup race for Germany. He is going to lock that up pretty soon into tomorrow. He is now 6-0. Sam Pardy is 6-0. Steve Rubin 6-0. Owen Turttonwald 6-0. So the door is ajar in the Player of the Year race. Seth Manfield started out 0-2, but then put the brakes on. 1-2, and then into constructed. 2-2, 3-2, now 4-2. But as long as he doesn't make the top 8 and one of the other 2 do, well, then the Pro Player of the Year will still be live coming into Sunday. Owen needs a minimum of top 8 depending on what Seth does, and Steve Rubin, he just needs to win the whole thing and hope Seth doesn't get to around about 10-6. So right now they're doing all that can be asked of them, 6-0, 6-0 for the 2 chasers in Player of the Year. Now the other Rubin, is doing very nicely, thank you. Hall of Famer Ben, he is at 5-1, alongside what a list we've got here. You've got Jacob Wilson, 5-1, Pro Tour Hall of Famer Paul Rietzl, 5-1. Li Shi Chan with his 4 Pro Tour top 8s is 5-1. Pro Tour champion Sean McLaren, Andrew Cuneo, the inventor of Draw Go, before some of you watching were even born. He's 5-1. Ken Yukihiro, 5-1. Pro Tour champion Jeremy Desani, 5-1. From France, chasing World Magic Cup glory from an outsider's berth, Louis Deltour, 5-1, runner-up at Grand Prix London in 2013. Andrew Brown of East-West Bowl. We haven't heard much about East-West Bowl so far, but Andrew Brown flying the flag, having a decent run on day 1, 5-1. Matt Sperling is 5-1. So, of course, is Luis Scott-Vargas. Yuya Watanabe is 5-1 because he's just lost to Patrick Dickman in the feature match area. Just a ton of the best players in the game accumulating at the top of the standings. Well, we're going to have another deck tech in a little while, but first of all, Brian David Marshall, as you know, went out into the wilds of Sydney in pursuit of the inside track on this Pro Tour. And teams mean different things to different people, and when it comes to the favourite memories of what is a team experience, well, that might be about dinner, that might be about drafts, that might be, sure, about finding the perfect constructed deck, or it might be about a hideous misplay on Magic Online. It takes all sorts to build a team, and that team bond is what we explore now in the team experience here at Pro Tour Eldritch Moon.
I think one of the best ones has to be before Pro Tour Philadelphia, when Conley Woods rented us a off-season ski lodge in the middle of nowhere in like Pennsylvania, where we were just there for like a week and a half, and it was just a lot of fun. I mean, it was just like, couldn't really go anywhere. We were just like testing this like pretty big house, and I don't know, we just had a lot of fun. We had to cook meals. We played water polo of all things because they had a pool. Like it was just, I don't know, it was just a kind of unique experience.
This year, I got to play in 2 straight team GPs with Luis Scott-Vargas and Eric Froelich. And I've been on a lot of different teams over the years. I haven't really been a player that was just firmly committed to one team. And I think it's the best team I've ever played on, and probably the best 3-man team that's ever been. I mean, I know that Phoenix Foundation's Pro Tour wins were incredible, but Kai, Dirk, Marco, me, Luis Farrell, I'm taking us.
The craziest one and my favorite was Grand Prix Nashville, because it was me, Jacob Wilson, and Jesse Hampton, and Jesse had some flight issues and got snowed in and had to drive in the snow for the first time in his life, because he's from Seattle, 6 hours to make it to the tournament. But he got there right as we finished deck building, so he wasn't even part of that. Was on 0 sleep, and we managed to make day 2 somehow despite that, and then won the tournament from there.
We merged with Channel Fireball and tested with them, and the result of that was very narratively appropriate. Like, it was like you had scripted it. Matt Nass was coming off having just developed a couple of very good decks in Rally and Hardened Scales in a row. And Sam obviously is a known brewer. And as soon as the teams merged, and then the end result was that ideas that both of them had been working on separately, we combined right before the PT, and that ended up becoming the Cryptolith Right deck that our team played to pretty good success and managed to put Luis in the top 8 with at that PT.
So my favorite team experience has actually just been the last 2 Pro Tours since Team Ultra added the Channel Fireball guys. Basically every Pro Tour is just a giant goof-off session. We're all just having a blast, laughing the entire time. Of course, we're testing for a Pro Tour, so there's a bunch of serious work going on, but like most of these guys are just way better than I am, so it's just a constant learning process, just trying to pick their brain on tons of different things and give my feedback and guidance where I can on certain things.
I've been able to kind of rejoin the community and rejoin this kind of awesome atmosphere. Playtesting with these guys, it's just an amazing kind of experience, and it's what I relish. It's really what I think what I miss when I'm not playing with it.
So the best team moment for me is just working together, building decks before the Pro Tour. The most fun I have playing Magic is definitely figuring out a new format when there are all these possibilities and they're all exciting. Working with Justin, he tries to be extremely grounded and realistic, and I'll play a deck and have a couple good results with it and just get very excited. And he's like, we don't know if this is any good. And I'm like, look, enthusiasm is part of my process. I'm just going to build something and play with it and get excited. And if I'm not doing that, I'm just going to be depressed and defeated and not productive. Before we even came out here to test with everyone else, we had like 30 different standard decks built, because whenever it would be like, okay, well, let's test, I'd be like, okay, but I want to try this new thing. Okay, but I want to try this new thing. And it would always be like, okay, we have to make 2 new decks before we can play any Magic. And we just ended up with a giant pile of deck boxes very quickly.
What I like the most about it is just going into a tournament and all of us doing well. We just had our Pro Tour Paris, where we had Cobblade, and Rise of the Eldrazi in Puerto Rico, where we had this really cool red, green, blue, just Oracle Mandia, Lotus Cobra, Jace the Mind Sculptor, Comet Storm, just tons of stuff going on. And that was a pretty cool deck. And then we also had, I guess, the Worlds back in 2011.
My favorite team experience had to have been Worlds in San Francisco, where it's like my local tournament, so all my family is there watching me as I top 8 the tournament alongside 3 teammates. That was just super awesome. I had an awful lot of people staying at my house for testing.
Probably this one, just because I get to work online, which is convenient with my job, and then there's enough people in Madison that I can still test live.
Yeah, so I was on the U.S. national team a couple of years ago, and Owen Turttonwald, Neil Oliver, and Isaac Sears were my teammates. And there was this one round we were playing for top 8 contention in the World Magic Cup, and Owen has to win game 3 for us to make the top 8, and he's got 5 minutes to win the green-black Constellation Mirror, and it was a really grindy mirror. Those games typically took 20 plus minutes. He plays as fast as I've ever seen anyone play Magic, and we barely get there. Super exciting. That match got me back on the Pro Tour because we had made it to the top 8, so just an amazing experience.
Way back in the day, I teamed with some guys from Florida / my friend Orrin Beasley, and those were kind of the guys I worked with when I got my first Pro Tour top 8 in Nagoya, and I still have teamed with them in Team Grand Prix since then. So, the last 2 we played in, we got top 4, and qualifying them for a Pro Tour when we top 4'd was pretty awesome to get to play with them again. So,
Grand Prix San Jose. This was the Team Grand Prix with the Pork Bun Oath, myself, Ifro, and Luis. I had 2 Hall of Famers on my team. Fortunate enough to have them on my team, and I wasn't qualified. I wasn't qualified for the second Pro Tour of that season, and I was basically just kind of happy to just kind of be relevant on the Pro Tour, and just to be able to play with these guys was a good feeling. And the only way for me to qualify for the next Pro Tour, which was 1 week away, is me winning the entire tournament.
Everything's in, and that's going to do it. Paul Cheon wins.
Oh my God, Paul Cheon just qualified for the PT.
He just qualified.
It was the only result that would get him there.
And we got there, and it was just insane. I just couldn't believe it. I mean, just dream come true. And that qualification gave me just enough points to actually give me gold. It put me back on the gravy train because I got those 3 pro points. I barely made. Had the enough pro points to qualify for the Pro Tour, and here I am.
That is great stuff. Thanks to BDM going into the house, and thanks to all the housemates for giving us their team experiences. Plenty more from them tomorrow here at Pro Tour Eldritch Moon. But right now it's Deck Tech time. Waiting for us is Pro Tour Hall of Famer, and he is with one of the latest Harry Yuya pros. It's Michael Bonder.